Hi, and welcome, friends of IFC. This is a new format I'm trying out. I have never done a podcast like video so far. However, today I had the opportunity to host two very amazing people working around IFC, so I couldn't resist. And I'm very much looking forward myself to this conversation with Léon van Berlo, the technical director of the buildingSMART, and Angel Velez, who is leading our Revit IFC team and has been responsible for all the great updates and new features you have been receiving in the last years. So welcome, Leon and Angel. It is really a pleasure to have you here for this video. Thanks for joining, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Before we start, maybe you can just briefly introduce yourself, though I'm pretty sure everyone interested in IFC knows who you are, but maybe just a very short intro.
My name is Angel Velez. I work at Autodesk, mostly on the Revit team. I've been working on IFC since 2004, so a long time. And I've kind of seen IFC go from IFC 2x2 through to 2x3, and obviously IFC4 and IFC5. I'm quite excited about where IFC5 is taking us kind of to the next level of what we can do with IFC.
Great, thank you. Leon, would you like to continue?
Léon van Berlo. I come from the Netherlands. I've joined buildingSMART International as a technical director in 2019. I have a history in the construction industry, and I kind of got addicted to this automation. And if you want to do automation, then you kind of also have to deal with data structures and data standards. Did a lot of innovation on those topics, and then got asked to join buildingSMART International in 2019. So we created a technical roadmap published in 2020 that had all of the stakeholders' inputs from the whole community and the industry, and basically that was the start for IFC5 already. But we also had to put some other things in place, a management and maintenance system for IFC. There was an IFC4.3 that was still in development. We had a BSDD that needed quite an overhaul. So all of these stepping stones have been leading up to IFC5, which now is indeed seeing the light more and more, and getting quite some more enthusiasm about it.
That's great. To kick off the conversation, I would like to start with a recent conference I attended some weeks ago, where kind of everyone was complaining about IFC being outdated, and especially because it is also based on STEP, which is not considered being the state of the art anymore. And I know that IFC is in general a topic many people complain about, mainly because maybe they also don't quite understand how it works or how it is intended to work. But Leon, what would your response to be in these situations?
Yeah, probably not the response that people would like to hear. I think that for standardization, where you exchange data, that has to be reliable. You don't want data loss, and it's a very important topic. So the more mature and reliable the technology is, the better, I would say. So the argument of using old technology doesn't necessarily have to be an issue. While you were asking the question, I was wondering if all of these people to the conference came in by plane, and because most of the reservation systems and the whole plane automation systems still work on MS-DOS, I think, and nobody complains about that. There's no outcry that has to be modernized because it's old-fashioned technology. So yeah, I think there's a lot that can be improved on IFC, and yes, that also brings along the fact that we probably have to start using newer technology, but just switching out technology because it's old and we have to renew it, I don't think that's an argument. I think we have to look at IFC5 because the industry is asking for new and more advanced technologies like incremental updates and collaborative design, collaborative engineering that are not possible with the current IFC. And to facilitate those needs, to facilitate those advanced use cases, yes, we also have to switch out the technology to something new. But just switching out technology because it's more fancy, I don't think is a really good way to go.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. In my mind, the switch to new technology is to support workflows that just didn't exist when Express and Step were created. You know, granular, cloud, AI. These are all things that didn't, weren't issues when we first created IFC, and so therefore weren't kind of made for that. That said, IFC2X3, IFC4, IFC4.3, whatever, those aren't going away anytime soon anyway. I mean, the whole point of an open standard is that you would hope that 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, you could actually read that data again. So I would hope that even if we switch to something new and fancy, we wouldn't just say, okay, now everything you've ever created in the last 30 years is gone, right? So in addition, by the way, I think there are still going to be archival workflows where the old step formats are going to be just much more convenient than a giant mass of JSON for storage. So I think that there's actually still value to the old technology in addition to the new. One more thing I want to say is that I think a lot of people don't like IFC because, as Leon mentioned, like, oh, it could be lossy or it can be not valid data or whatever else. And I think a lot of that has to do with two things. First of all, that we need to say that this works for very specific workflows, right? You can't just have generic interoperability for any possible case. There's no language for that. Nothing's going to solve that problem. You really want workflows that you're working against. And the other is, like, up until now, we've never had a validation service, right? So there's never been a way to say what a good or bad IFC file was, other than you try to read it in and it works or it doesn't work. And traditionally it's put it in 3 viewers and best 2 out of 3 win. So I'm very excited about the validation service work also as kind of a way to bring the quality of IFC up to the entire industry.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think many are still not aware of the validation service. I sometimes also point the people who ask me about the quality of an IFC, or if they struggle with a particular IFC, I ask them, have you run them through the validation service? And they are not really aware of that. So I think that's really a great a platform just to check the quality of your IFC files. It might not check really everything that might be off in a file, but still it's a great way to start. And IFC certification has been very complex in the past, and I know there are some changes underway also related to the software certification and the validation service. So Leon, would you like to share anything on that?
Yeah, I think the big change is that we're moving away from a couple of experts testing software to really trying to measure how it works in practice. So validation service, indeed, already mentioned, it runs on validate.buildingsmart.org. People can upload their IFC files and they're checked against the standard. So they're not being checked if all of the information you need is in there. We're not checking against information requirements. We're just checking, is this IFC file, is this IFC dataset valid according to the IFC standard? And if it is, you get all green checkboxes, and we're even working on functionality where you can then download it with a digital signature again to prove that it is valid. But that is indeed very helpful for end users using software. But what we get as buildingSMART is also a lot of information about how IFC is being used in practice, also information that we never had before. So these files are not being stored, but when we read them in, when we validate them, we get to see what software it was used to produce, what the date was, etc., etc. And all of these metrics are being stored in our database. So can imagine that the more people use the validation service, the more metrics we have on how software tools perform. So we can see how a certain version of Revit and a certain version of Civil 3D and also all of the other non-Autodesk tools, of course, how the IFC files that have been produced by those software tools are performing in a validation service. So what we do with that data, we generate metrics from it, we generate scorecards, and we're also publishing those. So what you would get as an end user is you can go to our website and you would see a scorecard with all the functional parts of IFC, so geometry, properties, but also typing and for infrastructure things like alignment. And you can see if it's a green box, we've consistently seen valid IFC data for that functional part of IFC. When it's a gray box, that software tool probably doesn't support it. And when it's a red box, we found errors. So these scorecards, and you can see examples of it on our website, or maybe you can even edit it in this video, really gives a very interesting insight in the functionalities and the reliability of software tools that we've seen in practice. And I think that's indeed a very different approach to software certification. We just show users how IFC is performing from those tools in practice instead of having a couple of experts being paid a lot of money to have one look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it also makes this kind of validation, it's not a certification anymore, but a validation accessible to everyone, even to the small software vendors and small tools who can just check the validity of their IFC files without needing to run through the whole certification process and the cost associated with it. Yeah, so my next question would be around IFC5. So everyone is talking about IFC5 these days. It seems to be really a paradigm shift. And I would love to hear a little bit about it from you, Léon. So what's so new and so exciting about IFC5?
Yeah, it's interesting because we've been working on it for years already, but all of a sudden, indeed, people are discovering it and are excited about it. Which of course is nice. Yeah, as Angel already said, we're really focusing on supporting some new use cases. So incremental updates. One of the typical use cases that I'm very excited about is that if you are a fire engineer, for example, and you need to add like fire rating properties to objects. In the current workflow, you had to import the whole IFC, add your properties, export the full IFC again, and then the receiving party had to merge it, and then you get all of these issues with GUIDs, and yeah, the whole LinkedIn is full about this as well. So what we want to do as a new use case is that the fire engineer just looks at the existing IFC and then adds their own properties. So you can see this as an incremental update, but you can also see it as a new kind of collaboration where you're on a much more granular level contributing data to objects. And the way we are envisioning this is through what we call small components. So you have an entity component system is the technology that we're using, where you really can add multiple components to an object, and that brings a lot of new possibilities, a lot of new use cases, and yeah, I can imagine that people get very excited about that.
That's great. Thanks, Léon. Angel, do you share the enthusiasm about IFC5 from a software vendor and implementer perspective?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think it's just the right time now. We've seen, I think COVID absolutely accelerated this, right? So there's a huge shift to the cloud. And once you shift there, you start thinking, well, we don't need files anymore either, do we? And kind of the shift towards granular data and entity component systems. So I think that the work IFC5 is doing is very much in line with what we're doing with our own AEC data model. It's very much in line with what other people are doing with, for example, USD. So it's really quite timely, and I'd like to see all of these kind of grow up together. so that we have maybe not exactly the same, but at least very similar concepts that can all interact with one another, and we have a much better chance of getting data in and out between systems that way. So, so I'm very eager to see kind of a unified direction in where we're going in terms of accessing granular data in the cloud, and as I mentioned before, also that's AI friendly, because that's clearly become a huge issue recently too, even since the original 2020 roadmap.
Yeah, absolutely agree on that. Yeah, it sounds really absolutely exciting, and I'm also very, very curious to see how it will change the way we work with data. But then on the other hand, we all know how long it took for the IFC4 or IFC 4.3 to even become the ISO standards. And Leon, I think you mentioned recently, and that's also the same feeling I have, that 80% are still using IFC2X3. So it's kind of a little bit difficult to say, how realistic is the timeline or the expectation for the release and the adoption of IFC5?
Yeah, it's very difficult to comment on timelines. I think the high percentage of usage of 2x3 is indeed also representing that is a very stable and proven implementation. So I can imagine that people stick to that. I do think that for IFC5, it's going to be a little bit different, because with 2x3 and 4 and 4.3, and now even an update of 4.3, you have this big monolithic thing that is one big standard that you have to bring to ISO, and all of the experts have to look at it and comment on it. And as soon as you change something at one place, it has implications somewhere else. With IFC5, we're following a much more modular approach, and everything you've seen on IFC5 so far is really about the core component. We really want to put that core component first, and then domain experts can really further extend it with domain modules where you define the definition of classes and properties. So the release will be much more phased, and I think by putting this first core component out there, also for software vendors and for end users, it's a lot easier. They don't have to dive into this big monolithic standard with thousands of properties. You can really dive into something that is much more lean, and then grow from there. So yeah, if you ask me for a timeline, when will IFC5 be there compared to what 4.3 is now? Yeah, that's again going to take years. But because we're releasing in phases, much more modular, I think the adoption of the core will be a lot quicker because it's a lot smaller and easier to adopt. And then, the more domain-specific modules will follow later. So there won't be one big bang of a release. It will be much more gradual, and also for that reason, the adoption by users will be much more gradual, I think, as well.
Yeah, and I think that's the key distinction is there's a question of when is IFC5 available and when is it done? And the answer to done is probably never, right? And there's always going to be extensions and new use cases and everything else. But again, this is something which parallels our own development of the AC data model, right? So the AC data model is going to start out not giving you access to every single thing that you've ever had access to in the past, but it's going to start with a core, ability to access geometry and parameters, and then we extend it over time. So IFC5, I see following a very parallel path where you have access to this kind of core information, and then over time you have access to more and more intelligent parametric information. As Leon mentioned before, there's still that monolithic workflow, which is where IFC2X3 and IFC4 will probably live forever, for a very long time, and that's okay, right? IFC5 is really much more around, I'm working with the data now. I don't want you to give me a printout. I want you to give me kind of something live that I can interact with, that represents a small subset of my data that then I can use and maybe modify much more seamlessly than before. So again, while it's all been going on for a while, it's still honestly very early days for all of us here. So I look forward to it kind of moving forward and seeing how people start actually using it.
Yeah, these are really very interesting thoughts. I'm trying to think about some more concrete use cases on how IFC5 will actually change the way we work in a software like Revit, or how we exchange data. I'm just wondering, do you have any concrete ideas about what future workflows this whole approach might enable?
Yeah, I think the nice thing about what we're seeing now already from users that are exploring IFC5 Alpha is that they come up with use cases that we could have never imagined. So, we have these core use cases. You want to have granular data. You want to do incremental updates. You want to do a lot of these typical things that we know are requested. And then we release an IFC5 Alpha that has all of these abilities. But obviously, that also opens up new possibilities. So you have this push-pull effect here, where we come up with a solution for known advanced use cases. But now that we have this technology, all of a sudden people are going to use it in ways we could have never imagined as well. So, yeah, for example, I saw a use case from someone who had a tunnel that was being digged, and they do like a meter or 1.5 meter or 1.2 meter every day. It's different every day. And then they modeled that excavation every day, and they put it together. So this used to be all individual files, but with IFC5, it's just one composition of different different parts. And as soon as you put it together, it's one excavation, and you have a time slider where you can see how it works. So all of these things that we could have never imagined would be so much more easy with IFC5. People are already exploring that and testing it. So yeah, I think if we look at the use cases a year from now, IFC5, even if it's still in alpha phase, will already have changed certain use cases that the industry will see in it. That yeah, for us are unpredictable but very exciting.
Absolutely. Angel, would you like to add something to that?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely true that having more flexibility and being able to kind of come up with, from how we would look at it now, fairly arbitrary groupings of data, to kind of come up with your own queries of what subset of data, and more importantly, that data then exists by itself. I mean, in IFC currently, you can do that already. I mean, you could say, hey, I want to only have, I want to see the fire rating of all the walls, all the walls in level 1, right? But to do that, you have to bring the whole structure with it. You can't just have a fire rating sitting in space for a wall in level 1. Whereas with IFC5, you can really just bring exactly the data that you're interested in, whatever it is. So we're talking about, kind of going below structured data with full elements that have to be all valid, to really this kind of sub-element level of information. So I think that's where we're going to see the real improvement. But also, as Léon said, where you do incremental updates, where again, you don't have to give back everything and then hope that's exactly the same as before. You can just say, hey, this one thing has changed. Can you just update this, please? And so that's just so much more flexible than we're able to do right now. Again, it's all possible right now. IFC is a text file. You can do anything with a text file. It's just a lot harder.
Yeah, exactly. I see that a lot where people don't complain because they receive huge IFC files which contain a lot of details, grooves and stuff they don't really need. They are just really interested in a couple of elements, but they get a huge IFC file which they need to open, to process, to work with. And of course, there are ways to really access and extract only the data you want, but still not everyone knows how to do that. The people just want to link the IFC file in Revit or load it in a viewer, and it's not that easy to find or to filter the data you are looking for. So that's really the big potential I see, really having the access to the data that you need, and also being able to add data, to update data, to, you know, add the fire rating. That's such a powerful example, because it happens so often that, you know, how do you add the fire rating to the IFC wall? It's not really that easy nowadays. So that's absolutely very exciting. I know we are not talking about roadmaps or anything related to that, Angel, and I don't want to force you into answering this question, but still I was thinking, hearing from Leon that the core of IFC5 will be released very soon. When do you think will Revit users maybe see something, maybe even experimental around IFC5?
Yeah, that's a good question. Obviously, I can't give you any dates anyway. But I actually see two places where you'd see it, right? And while it's interesting for Revit users, I think the first place that I hope you see it is in the AC data model, right? So you get your Revit model in the cloud, and then you can get IFC data in or out of the AC data model. I suspect that we would want to have something directly from Revit, including just the ability to even just say, hey, just give me a bunch of IFC5 JSON on my local disk. I just want it for whatever reason. But again, I think we would want to see it as part of the ACDM first, and then we'd kind of transfer that to Revit. Yeah, and so really, I think a lot of it's going to depend on, you know, when we get our toolkits updated to some of this. Obviously, it's also still, you know, we talked about it's in pre-alpha going to alpha. So we'll probably wait for it to be a little bit more stable before we actually start putting stuff out. I know for IFC 4.3, we had like release candidate 1, 2, 3, 4, which is great for people being able to test, but then also now you've got release candidate 3 files that you have to support forever, which isn't great. So we might wait for it to stabilize a little bit more before we would expose it. But again, that's one of the benefits of the open source, that we have at any time when we feel it's ready, we can try to go back and even have it in, you know, existing versions 2025, 2026, depending on, again, what our toolkits are set up to support.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Angel. Anything to add from your side, Leon? Any thoughts, expectations on the software vendors and implementers?
Oh, no, I think the software vendors have been instrumental to bring us to the point where we are now. They're very supportive. Yeah, like Angel said, it's not a coincidence that IFC5 is progressing in the same direction as the Autodesk tools. The same goes for all of the other software tools. I mean, obviously, we're looking at the technologies, we're looking at what the industry wants. Basically, we're all doing the same. And the role of buildingSMART is to make sure we release something that is kind of like a common denominator that everyone can use. But because then only then it will be used. So yeah, I'm just very excited and looking forward to indeed get this in the hand of end users as soon as possible.
Yeah, that's great. And, you know, you remind me now of something that most of the people are not really aware of, that, you know, all the software vendors are actually collaborating with the buildingSMART in developing this new standard, or in developing the new standards in general. And this is something what is perceived more like a very competitive environment. And we often hear, you know, this software vendor or that software vendor doesn't care about IFC. But then when I see the reports from your implementer meetings and so on, then everyone comes together and everyone works on the same topic and on the same issues. So that's really very, very inspiring to see, and I hope more people will be aware of that.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's a very important point to make indeed. I always say that a standard is only a standard when end users can use it. So when it's implemented in software, otherwise it's just an idea. So it really makes sense from a buildingSMART perspective as well to develop this together with the industry, with every kind of stakeholder, and that includes the software vendors. So yeah, we're very happy with all of the support we're getting.
Yeah, there is another topic which I wanted to say for the end, like kind of a bonus question. I wanted to ask you, Leon, and Angel as well, of course. So one question I hear most is, why is the IFC export and import in other BIM authoring tools not lossless? So why do we see, especially with the complex objects, why do we see a loss of data, especially when it comes to geometry, fidelity, parametric elements, and so on? And I think there was an assumption in the beginning with the openBIM concept that IFC was actually intended to be a lossless data transfer from software A to software B. And I always thought, and that's also what I've always been saying in my blogs and my videos, is that it is a kind of an unrealistic and also a little bit unfair expectation when it comes to IFC, because that's not really what IFC, at least now, is intended for. Would you agree with that, Leon, or what are your thoughts?
I think the objective of IFC has been changing quite a bit over the years, also depending on where it's being used and what it works for. I would definitely say most of the reliable and successful use cases and user workflows are indeed using IFC much more as a reference in the background. So you don't really import it, but you use the data from others to further collaborate on and to add your data to it. I think that's the most successful use case. And even with an IFC5, where it's a lot easier to have lossless import and export, I would still want to question if that is really something the industry wants. I mean, also from a legal perspective, do you really want others to change your data? So these kind of workflows and use cases I think are very important to think about. I mean, just blaming some kind of a tool because it doesn't really import data from others into your environment, yeah, that is kind of an easy way out to say that it doesn't work. But really looking at the workflows, what is actually needed in the industry, how does that work, what are the technical implications, what are the implications for the standard, but also what are the legal implications of sharing that kind of data, I think are very important. And yeah, we're really setting a massive step there as well with IFC5. But I think from an end user perspective, how data exchange works and how it's being used, there's a lot of copyright and legal issues as well that you can't just step over by blaming or pointing to technology.
Yeah, for me, the big issue is the definition of lossless. If you have two products that are truly 100% interoperable, that really everything worked exactly the same in both of them, just buy the cheaper one because they're actually identical, right? The reason that, one of the reasons to have an open standard is so that people can use the best product for what they're doing at the moment, right? The one they know best, the one that does whatever task they're trying to do the best. That means that product is some sort of differentiation from other products. And that means that that's difficult to standardize, right? So if I'm doing something differently, if I have some value added, there's going to have to be some loss in business logic between what that product does and what everything else does in the world, right? So I think we can all agree that, if you create an object in one system and you bring it into another system and it looks completely different, right? That's clearly lost, and that would be something you would not expect to happen. On the other hand, I've also had people complain about, hey, I measured this dimension. It's supposed to be 13 meters, but it's actually 12.999999998 meters, right? This is incorrect. I'm like, yes, it's incorrect. And let me know when you have the tool that can, measure to the atomic level, at which point we will be fixing our software to support that. All right. So it's is that lossless that 13 becomes 12 followed by 9 nines, or is that just noise? So I think that's another level we have to think about is, so there's two levels. First of all, the level of noise. Is a facetation of an object loss, data loss, right? It used to be a smooth object and now it's faceted. It's a mesh representation. Is that data loss? For some workflows, it is, right? For other workflows, like you said, like if it's a reference workflow, it's perfectly acceptable. So it really has to do with what are the workflows we're supporting and what is the data that's necessary for that workflow, and everything else is just a bonus or actually maybe bad, right? Maybe you don't want to have a beautiful nerve surface being passed to your viewer that has no idea how to calculate, nerves. Like really all it can handle is a mesh. So again, should you be able to start in a competitive product and then bring that into Revit and work as if you had started in Revit in the first place? That's a really kind of a holy grail there, and it's very hard to achieve. But is that really the workflow that you need? Or do you need to be able to take someone else's manufactured content and just view it in your model, right? So if we can set proper expectations as to what is your data, what does it mean, what should be your expectations, and being able to use it across products, I think people would start to understand what can be done and maybe be less upset when they see that 8 in the 14th decimal place after their in their measurement and wonder why we're breaking all of their data.
Yeah, that's absolutely a good point, Angel. So where I often see that it's not really, related to only to workflows where someone is changing someone else's data, which is a deliverable. Because I also absolutely see the legal objective there, which is very relevant. But there are often workflows where, for example, the architect changes and the new architect is using another software and the old architect has only half finished the design, and the new architect kind of tries to reuse that data by reusing the IFC, which is maybe something that will improve with the IFC5 in the future. But as you just mentioned, I also see it today as something where definitely you can do it, but there will be some manual work involved and some tricks and workarounds depending on where the data comes from. And the definition of lossless is really also very interesting, because it's not really feasible unless you really develop a software from scratch which works natively with the IFC, right? But that's not something that is feasible for the major BIM authoring tools we have on the market right now. A bonus question for Angel, something I always like to ask you about. So can you tell us a little bit about what you are working on and what we might see in the next releases of Revit? Of course, as always, safe harbor. Don't make any purchasing decision based on whatever Angel says from now on.
Yeah, so in general, we have kind of 3 kind of core tenets that we're working on, which is fidelity, performance, and kind of usability, customer experience. And so right now we're working on, in general, I made a promise to Layla a few Autodesk universities ago to get rid of as many text files as possible from Revit. So that's what we're working on. So we already have kind of category mapping, and so we're trying to do the same thing with parameters and have a good UI for parameter mapping. But that's kind of on the experience level, and we'll continue to make those sorts of improvements. But on the kind of performance and fidelity, we've already switched over to using a kind of a common core engine for Link IFC. And we've already seen that there's been a huge improvement in the fidelity of linking IFC models in. Obviously, anytime you switch, you improve 9 things and break 1. So we're making sure that we kind of cover the ones. But overall, it seems like it's been a big step. And so we would like to also kind of work towards, how do we standardize on the export side in the future. But that's a big roadmap, and definitely no time frames on that. These are big projects. But of course, let's not forget, in addition, we do want to see IFC5 support. So when that gets closer to be ready, we'll kind of put that more officially on the roadmap as something that we're going to work on.
Now that you mentioned the AU, you also have a session at AU, right? Which we could promote, where we will get the latest updates on the newest releases in or the newest IFC functionalities in Revit and also in other Autodesk products, right?
That's right. It was yours truly co-leading the session. So yeah, so we'll see. We'll giving updates to last year's session. It is only a 30-minute session, so I will have to talk twice as fast.
Oh, I thought it was 1 hour. Ah, okay. I didn't.
Yeah, no, 30 minutes. So again, we're gonna have to talk twice as fast than usual. But yeah, but we'll give an update of what we've been doing in the last year, and maybe even throw in some tips and tricks. Let's see.
Yeah, looking forward to that.
Okay,
Any
I do
other
need to drop.
thoughts? Sorry. Yeah. Thanks for joining, Angel.
Thank
Any
you.
other thoughts? Anything you would like to add, Leon?
Thanks for the recording. Thanks for the conversation. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you both. Always a pleasure to talk to you. I'm going now to check the IFC5 training. And really looking forward to that. And yeah, I'm really curious to see what we will be talking about next year. So maybe we just meet in a year from now and check what's new about IFC5, or maybe even sooner. I don't know. Let's see.
Yeah, let's see.
Thank you both.
Thank
and
you.
have a nice day. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.